Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA Front Office Show. We've actually got moves to talk about today, things that happened around the NBA and things, plural, multiple things that took place, including a guy who is kind of good, him getting a new contract. We'll start there. By the way, I'm Trevor Lane. He's Keith Smith. Keith, let's start with here with this. Steph Curry gets an extension done with the Warriors. Now, it's just a 1 year deal, but that's where that pesky over 38 rule comes into play, right?
Yeah, that's what he was limited to. Could only do a 1 year deal. Stephen Curry is, let me make sure I've got my math correct here. He is going to be 36, or he is 36 now. So
Yes.
he'll be over 38 in that last year. So he can only add the 1 more year because he's already got this year next. So he's adding 1 more year at about 62.5 million. That'll go on the Warriors books for him. So that is a couple people asked when this came out. They're like, isn't the max projected salary like 59.5 million? He can get the greater of the max salary or 105% of his prior salary. And since his prior salary is already at above the max amount, he gets 105%. That's not like a Curry unique thing. That's any player that's at that level of salary is up there. LeBron was in that position a couple years ago before the cap jumped up. So we're in a position where that'll be Curry on the books there. We've got it already in there at Spot Track. And if you scroll it over just a little bit to like show us the out years there, there we go. You can see the only money past the year Curry just extended into is Buddy Hield, and that's a player option that is also only partially guaranteed. So this essentially aligns Curry with Wiggins and Green and Kyle Anderson. They'll have some rookie guys, obviously, Podziemski and Trace Jackson Davis, that I imagine they'll probably be hanging on to beyond this, but we'll see what happens with Kuminga and Moody. But Curry's now lined up with the other expensive guys, which kind of tells me Warriors about a 3-year window here to figure this out and make a run. And after that, they're primed to be ready to fully reset and restart with the franchise.
And my prediction here, and it's not a bold one, this is not a hot take by any means, but it's that those three guys do not finish their contracts together. I think Andrew Wiggins ultimately gets moved in a deal, because I do think the Warriors, Joe Lacob was talking about this, it had to be about a week ago, saying they don't want to be, I'm paraphrasing, but they don't want to be an ordinary team. I think the Warriors are going to be motivated to go out there and make moves. And when you look at the players that are on their roster, they actually have a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of contracts that can be easily stacked up to try to go make something happen. When you look at the expiring deals with the Anthony Melton, Gary Payton II. Now, Melton just signed this past summer. You can't trade him for a bit, but still, you've got, around the trade deadline, you've got plenty of movable parts here. The non-guaranteed third year with Kyle Anderson, that's going to make that an even more attractive contract for teams. Buddy Hield, only $3 million guaranteed. And then even if the Warriors do say, you know what, everything's good as is, you're right, you do build in that flexibility for your post-Curry era, where you would just have Buddy Hield on the books. And again, it's $0 guaranteed. You're going to add salaries that will take into those places. But I think the Warriors have actually done a really good job when you look at this cap sheet of building in a lot of flexibility while still giving them, I think, a lot of room to maneuver in the present.
Yeah, I agree completely. And it's important to remember, because the Warriors shed so much salary this summer in terms of Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry, that was like combined 70 plus million coming off the books. They got, at one point, they were all the way under the tax. They're now over the tax. They are hard capped at the first apron. They're about 500K under that first apron, but they don't have all the restrictions that we have commonly come to associate with them that were kind of built for them in the new CBA, right? It was, the new CBA was designed, no Warriors, no Clippers. Like, we don't want what they're doing. And guess what? Neither one of them are even in those positions anymore. So very, very quickly. But so when it comes to your point of, they could add and stack some contracts together to go get somebody, as long as they don't go over that first apron. And they're hard capped there because of the sign and trades for Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield. But as long as they don't go over that first apron amount, they're fine to do kind of whatever it is they need to do. So if they could put together, I'm just making it up, but Gary Payton and Kevon Looney, that's 17 million in tradable salary. Perfectly fine for the Warriors to do that, to go out and get some more salary if they need to and go. And I'm with you. I think we're going to see them. It may end up ultimately being a regrettable thing, but I think we could see them in the next, let's call it the next year cycle. So basically now through next offseason, maybe trade some future draft capital if they can find the right trade to bring in guys that can really help them really make a run. Because I think they want to make the most of Curry and Draymond Green the last couple years of this with them and really try to maybe make one more run at this thing and see what they can do. And that could be one where, like, let's say we hit the trade deadline this year and they're playing better than expected. They're firmly within that top 6. They may look at it and say, all right, let's try to fortify this team to really make a real run.
Well, and you say, well, now, the Warriors and the Clippers were the targets of the new CBA, and now they're not even in a position where this new CBA is going to, hit them that way. But had the new CBA not come in, I think Klay Thompson is still a Warrior.
Sure.
Paul George is still a Clipper. So that the fact that they've dropped so far below tells you, I mean, really, if you're the NBA, you're just Adam Silver is somewhere grinning saying it's working. It's working because right now the Clippers and the Warriors both reduced their salaries. Now, I think the Warriors did a nice job bouncing back from that, and they've got, some good flexibility built in here. They've still got a good team. It'll be interesting what happens with Jonathan Kuminga. He's going to want a big contract after this coming season. We'll see where that goes. Moses Moody will need a we'll need I was thinking about Brandin Podziemski, and so I almost said Moses Moody will need a podcast. Maybe we'll get
maybe he gets one. Everybody else has one. Why not him?
The Moody Hour or something like that. But Moses Moody will need a new contract, and then you've got Podziemski at least locked up for another couple of years under team control after this season. So I do like what the Warriors have put together here. Mentioning Pods, we do have a little bit on him. He's expected to step into a bigger role, was reportedly off limits on the trade market for the Warriors to the point where they would not consider putting him into a deal for Lauri Markkanen. What do you think about that, about how determined to hang on to Brandin Podziemski the Warriors are?
I would like to know, what if somebody better than Lauri Markkanen was on the table?
Sure.
What would it have looked like then? Right. Like where were you at? Like, okay, that trade, you didn't want to move him, but was there another trade that maybe, like, what if the Paul George thing had kind of come to fruition that had been talked about quite a bit? Would you have put him in that trade? Like, my guess is, and I'm not saying it's Paul George, but there's some players obviously where, if Giannis wanted to go there, clearly they'd probably put him in a trade for Giannis with that. But they're very high on him. And I think his contract, I'm glad you left the contract screen up here, 3.5 this year, 3.7 next year, 5.7 in his final year, rookie scale. If you can hit on those late round draft picks, which Podziemski was one of, and then Trace Jackson Davis as the second round pick exception guy, who's also a rotation level guy for the Warriors, having that kind of cheap talent is massive because that allows you to then go spend money elsewhere. They didn't have those guys on those deals. They might have been looking, all right, well, we can't do the Anderson and Heald and Melton all for $9 to $12 million. We have to plug that all into one guy, right? Because we have to go get somebody who can really fill a spot. So clearly Podziemski is going to take on Klay Thompson's role. He kind of already done that last year anyway. But one of the things that came out was they want him to shoot 8 to 10 3-pointers a night, which that's Klay, right? You want him to be what Klay was. Now, my guess is this is kind of like when the Lakers said, we want Anthony Davis to take a couple more threes per game. And it's almost a challenge, right? It's like a challenge to the guy of like, hey, we believe in you. Please shoot more. And whether he gets to 8 to 10, that seems like a lot. Because, I mean, Curry's going to take 10 himself. Like, 12. That's already, So you're already talking 23s between those two guys. And then, there's going to be, Buddy Hield's going to get his 5 or 6 minimum per game. You're going to get, 1 or 2 from Draymond, 1 or 2 from Wiggins. I get it. There's room for that. But I think it just more speaks to how high the Warriors are on Podziemski. I really like him. I think he's a really good all-around player. He can do a lot of things. And I think what's going to be key for them is he can really pass. So he's in a spot where one of the places where the Warriors almost got stuck a little bit was becoming a little too overly reliant on Curry to set up his own shots. And when you have Podziemski in there, I think he can handle the ball just enough. Curry can play off him a little bit, which is where the Warriors have been at their best historically, when Curry can kind of do a lot of different ways to get his own looks. So, or to get his looks rather. So I'm high on Podziemski too, and I again don't know if they wouldn't have traded him in a bigger trade, but I think for
Yeah.
now, right move to hang on to him. I don't know that Markkanen was gonna lift them beyond top 6, maybe. Like I don't know where that would have taken them. I don't think it would have vaulted them back into play championship contention, but I'm okay with kind of staying a little more future focused here.
In terms of Podziemski, just because I've seen the way the narrative has grown around like Austin Reeves, let's put a stop to before it even happens. The Warriors don't see him as untouchable, Keith. I think you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. I think there's like what 5 players in the NBA that are really truly untouchable.
Yeah.
He's not. If the right deal came along, I'm sure the Warriors would, like you said, if it's Giannis or whoever. So don't hear what we're not saying. We're not saying the Warriors will not move. They wouldn't move him in a deal for Larry Mark, and in part because they felt like they had other assets that they could trade in that kind of a deal. So don't look at Podziemski and think, oh, the Warriors think he's a superstar. How dumb are they? And stuff like, no, that's not what they're saying. Just they're not going to move him unless they get a significant upgrade, is I think probably where the Warriors thinking actually is, just as with the Lakers with Austin Reeves and many other players around the NBA. There's a lot of guys who it wouldn't make sense for teams to trade them because an opposing team wouldn't offer as much value as what they present to their current team. But that doesn't necessarily mean a player is untouchable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, because the guys get these labels and then it's all that does is make people mad later, right?
Yeah.
When it's like, oh, we don't have player X
Oh,
because this guy was untouchable. And it's like, all
exactly.
right,
And
we don't, yeah,
Podziemski has a 3 for 12 shooting night one night, and everybody's
yeah,
coming out of the woodwork saying it. SMH, the Warriors have him as untouchable, or
yeah,
whatever. That's not what the deal is. That's not how this works
yeah.
in the NBA.
Where are you at? I know we kind of talked this before, but where are you at on these guys? Like, hey, are they a top 6 team for you or a play-in tournament team? Like where are you at on the Warriors?
I've got them as a play-in team in the Western
Yeah,
Conference right
that's
now,
where I am too.
with the ability to, like, there's upside. They could go
Sure.
farther. I do like the additions that they made. There's the potential for them to wind up higher than that, but it's not so much me saying I don't think the Warriors are good as just I think the West is really, really difficult. And so there's
Yeah.
a lot of teams in there that are pretty close. So yeah, I've got them as a play-in team, but in the West in particular, like, being a play-in team, and I know this has come across as biased because that's what the Lakers were this last season, but being a play-in team shouldn't have quite the same negativity with it that it normally does because of how deep the West is. There are really good teams that just wind up in the play-in because there's so many
Mm-hmm.
there's so many quality teams in the Western Conference.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the Warriors were the last playing team last year with 46 wins. So, that's
Yeah.
it is interesting by the time we got to determining the final playoff teams. So the teams that actually won through the playing tournament, the wins were a lot closer. It's just
Mhm.
those last 2 playing teams in the East and it's going to be the same way this year, where it's like, well, somebody has to make it. So I
Yeah.
guess these guys. Whereas in the West, you've got, we're assuming the Grizzlies are going to vault themselves back up. So and the Rockets are going to be right there. So you've kind of got 12 teams, and that could be light depending on where you're at on the Spurs. And I know some people are like, I wouldn't fully count out the Jazz too. Now somebody will be the Memphis of last year, because it happens every year. Someone's going to be bad that we're expecting to be good, but that's
Mhm.
still, even if you're out on Utah and Portland, it's still only 3 teams, and that's to the point of it gets really challenging to go there. You just can't afford injuries, and you can't afford like bad weeks.
No.
You have we talked about it all throughout last season. A bad week in the West could change your spot in the standings by like 3 or 4 spots, and that's tough. But yeah, all right. So we're pretty much on the same page with these guys. I could see them in the top 6 if everything goes great, but I don't know. There's certainly risk here, age related, Draymond related. I think they're in a little bit better position to come through some of those things if they pop up. But I still worry a little bit. They don't have a lot as far as interior defense goes on
No,
this
they
group.
don't.
That's a
But that's not really
kind
how
of
they've been
worrisome spot.
built. Especially they
Yeah.
started to move away from Kevon Looney last season.
Hmm.
So, but that's not really what the Warriors are either, isn't it? They've
Yeah.
always been a high 3-point shooting team, and they're going to get you there. But yeah, not a lot at the rim. But maybe that's a move that we see them make, down the
Yeah.
road.
Could be.
So, all right, let's talk about your team, Keith. Lonnie Walker to the Celtics on a Exhibit 10 contract. So now in this case, and we talked about, I don't know if it was last show or show before, but we've talked about Exhibit 10 contracts a couple times this summer, and essentially what they mean. Typically, we see Exhibit 10 contracts as a way to funnel a player to the G League. I don't think that's exactly the case here with Lonnie Walker. I look at this as more of a, hey, we're going to bring you into training camp, and this is your opportunity to earn our 15th spot. That's the way I'm seeing it. Do you see that as accurate coming out, looking at it from a Celtics perspective? I just have a hard time imagining Lonnie Walker being routed to the G League.
Yeah, this is definitely not designed today. Like we talked about all the Pacers moves, for example, with Kyle Mangus, Cameron McGriff, Dakota Mathias. Those guys were all signed with the idea of they're going to play for the G League team.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what's happening here. That may end up being the result. Maybe that is the result. Maybe Lonnie Walker does get waived at the end of the preseason and there isn't another spot for him and he just goes to the G League. That could be how this plays out. But I'm with you. I think this is more of a, hey, if you come in and really knock our socks off throughout the course of training camp and the preseason, maybe we have a roster spot for you. Boston has historically preferred to leave that 15th spot open. But my guess is when they sat down and looked at it, they said, hey, this is what we're willing to offer. And at some point, the value almost becomes too good to pass up for the team side of this. So, hey, if he's willing to take this, great. Let's bring him in because it's literally no risk for the Celtics. If they don't want him, they just waive him and move on and go. And there's nothing at the end of the preseason that stays on the books or anything. And if it works out, it's still almost kind of no risk because it'll be a non-guaranteed minimum contract. So that's where Walker will come in. I don't think we've added him yet on Spot Track. It's only because he may be on there. I'm not sure. He might be tucked in under Ron Harper Jr. Down there on the bottom, but he is and he's not there yet because it hasn't actually happened. So we tend to hold until things actually happen. But in this case with Walker, I like it for the Celtics just because why not? Right? It's a chance to get a look at him and see it. And it's very funny. A lot of the reaction was yesterday was, well, this guy only shot like 42% last year and couldn't get minutes on the Nets. And I think what's getting missed there is, yeah, that's true. He did only shoot 42%, but over half of his shots were 3-pointers and he shot 38% on those. So that's kind of what he's starting to. Yeah, he's kind of starting to transition more into being like a 3-point specialist type. He's not quite like the Sam Hauser level of like just that's what he's going to do is take threes. But I think he's starting to transition into that a little bit. And I think what you're seeing is that may be a role where if he can, that could hold up and that could be a whole new like career unlocked for him of, hey, just come off the bench and shoot a bunch of threes and that could be good. So that part I'm not there. And then the Nets transitioned away from him, one, because he got hurt, and two, they just started playing all their younger guys by the end of last season because they were like, this season's lost for us. Let's just play these kids and see what it looks like. So I'm not fully sold that like Lonnie Walker is not still a good NBA player. I think he is.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I could speak to him from his time with the Lakers and everything. He's a guy, he can hit the three. He gets lost defensively at times. He is really athletic, but that athleticism often doesn't translate on the defensive side of the ball. He does have a nice pull-up jumper. He can do some breathtaking things if he gets out in transition. He's only 25 years old, right? It feels like Lonnie Walker's been around forever, but he's only 25. So in terms of like a no-risk guy, he's better than he may be in terms of overall talent, he may be the best player that signed an Exhibit 10 this year. And I don't think that's a stretch. I'm trying to think
Oh, so
if there's
far,
somebody
yeah, I
else.
think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody else who signed an Exhibit 10. You know what you're getting out of him. He can come in. He could come in and give you, I don't know, like 15 points in game 4 of the playoffs or something like that. At any given moment, he had the wonderful Lonnie Walker game for the Lakers. But no, he's a guy who can come in, can light it up really quickly, and could give you off the bench a quick 10 points or something like that. He'll also have some nights where he can be a little bit frustrating, but given the cost here and even the limited opportunity cost, because it's an Exhibit 10 deal, this is a no-brainer. You let him come in, see if he's a fit with the team, see if it's something that works. He's extremely athletic. He can put up points pretty quickly. And if it works, great. You've got a guy who's on the end of your bench who's capable of giving you 10 points on a random Wednesday night in January. And that's more than you can say for most guys that are the 15th spot on anybody's team.
Yeah, I just, I look through this Celtics team. They're pretty deep, right? They've got guys that can play not only across the starting group, but in their backup groups, guys who are now proven playoff performers. Like, there were legitimate questions. Could Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser hold up in the playoffs? They did. They did it all the way to a title, so they can do it. Xavier Tillman didn't play a lot for the Celtics because he had injuries and then the unfortunate death of his father. But when he did play, he had his moments. Luke Cornett is a guy people are kind of like, Luke Cornett, really? But Luke Cornett contributes well when he's given his time, because the big thing is he just does what they want him to do: screen, rebound, and be big around the rim. And even that goofy, Cornett contest where he, jumps on 3-point shots when he's standing near the rim, just to kind of distract guys. But the jury's very much out whether that works or not, by the way. But like, he contributes. Then you've got the more still developmental guys like Jaden Springer, Baylor Shireman, Neemias Queta. These guys are all in a spot where you're just trying to see, what does it look like with them. And I'll say, if Walker pops and the Celtics are like, man, we still would like the roster flexibility, Jaden Springer's an expiring $4 million contract. Give somebody a second-round pick, and you're off that deal very easily. And you could have a team say, we kind of think Jordan Walsh could maybe play for us if he's not going to break through for you. Again, you could move him and get open that roster spot if you need to. There's countless ways they can do that. So I look at this as a no-brainer. I will tell you, when I saw the tweet come through, my first thought was like, is this a fake Woj? And then I was like, it can't be. I got a notification. Like, this seems weird to me. And then when Shams followed up, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, what is going on here? Because if guys like Lonnie Walker are signing Exhibit 10 deals, there's no better test case for me that we need expansion. Like, this guy should just be rostered somewhere. And there's not, I tweeted it out earlier today. Yeah. It's not exactly like the holy cow, what all these incredible free agents left, but there's still like 10, 12 guys that can legitimately play.
Markelle Fultz is still out there.
Yeah, Markelle Fultz is still out there. Guys like Isaac Okoro, he's restricted, so we know that situation. But like Doug McDermott, Jetty Osman, like, there are guys that can still play. Even guys like Landry Shamet can still play. Justin Holiday. Like, there's a whole bunch of guys out there that could, maybe even be on the back ends of rotations on decent teams. So yeah, I mean, we're ready for expansion. It is beyond time to make that happen.
We should, one of these days, we'll do like an expansion show or something like that.
Sure.
And just focus on that topic. But yeah, I think that it does show that the NBA needs expansion and they have the talent for expansion. But I also think it speaks to, and you mentioned this on X last night, and I responded on there, but it also shows you how hesitant, how wary, how cautious NBA general managers have been this summer under the new collective bargaining agreement. I think we've seen a lot of test cases where things happen very differently than they would have in previous seasons. For example, I mean, I look at Lonnie Walker still being around and nobody giving him a veteran minimum. Like, that's something, right? But also, you look at guys like Brandon Ingram, right? Who I think a year ago, if his contract situation was the same and we're under the old CBA, he's probably moved. Somebody has given up value for Brandon Ingram, but the problem is teams are realizing that under the new CBA, you're going to have to pay Brandon Ingram like he's your second best player. And if he's not, if you want to win a championship, he probably needs to be your third best player at most. And if that's the case, you really can't pay him under the new CBA as a second best player. You can't just hand out a max contract the way we've seen in the past. So teams are being very, very careful about long-term money. Teams are being careful about who gets a max contract now, more so than they have been before. When we used to have that conversation about, yes, LeBron and Giannis and Jokic and all these guys are max guys. And I know some of these other guys that are getting max maybe aren't in that same tier, but it's really these guys are getting overpaid on the max. Now we're starting to see teams withhold max contracts from players. Teams don't want to give a guy like a Brandon Ingram a max, whereas in the past he probably gets it in an instant. So we are seeing some serious changes here, and I wonder if there's a rebalancing that we see at some point, because right now it feels like everybody is dipping their toe in the water and they're a little bit afraid to fully dive in. At one point, I think somebody's going to test it a little bit more, and maybe things relax a little bit heading into next summer. But right now, we've seen a lot of general managers behave very, very cautiously with this new collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, in addition to that, I think there's two things draft related driving some of this. I think the new second round pick exception, where teams largely have their second rounders, if they're not on a two-way contract, because that's what they were drafted for, if they are somebody they signed, they have them for 4 years, and they're more reluctant to just kind of cycle through those last couple roster spots, because I have this young guy for 4 years on a minimum deal. Like, I would like to see what becomes of it, because we just talked about a little bit with Trace Jackson Davis. If the guy pops, well, now you're getting surplus value out of the player, because maybe he's a $10 to $12 million player who you're paying $2 million to, and you're feeling pretty good about that. So you have that part of it. And then the second part is teams are being, I say this noting the Knicks traded every pick they could.
Sure.
Teams have generally been pretty cautious with just throwing draft picks around.
Yes.
Now some of that is because Oklahoma City, New Orleans, and now Brooklyn own like a third of all.
They've got all the picks anyway.
Like. Yeah.
Right.
So maybe that's the bigger part of it. But the reality is, I think some teams are being a lot more cautious with, all right, we'll give up a pick for Brandon Ingram because of everything you said. Plus, now we're out of draft pick too. Yeah. So if we don't feel great about handing him his next deal, why would we give up a future pick to do something like that? Whereas in the past, I think you would have seen a team say, all right, we've got a little bit of a hole at the small forward spot. We feel we'll get something done with them. And if we don't, it's not the end of the world. We're out, one pick. That becomes a little bit of a different story, right? When it is, yeah, we don't want to do this kind of trade right now. So I think we are in a spot where everybody's just kind of feeling this stuff out. What I don't like is we do have a handful of teams, and we're not going to go through them now because it's just not a worthy good use of our time. But there are teams that are sitting on exceptions and the like that have plenty of distance under the tax. They could be giving out minimum contracts, but some of that is driven by the roster spot stuff that I talked about, where you probably have a couple extra guys on roster that you're like, yeah, Lonnie Walker could maybe pop for us, but at best he's going to be like our 7th or 8th man. I'd rather take the upside in this kid who we have for 2 years more on this minimum deal that we can develop, and maybe he develops into something. And then if I need that exception later in December, January, February, I can use it then. So it is a kind of interesting point in the league right now where a lot of guys are just kind of hanging out there waiting on what's coming for me. Like Markelle Fultz, crazy that nobody assigned Markelle Fultz. Like he absolutely should be on a team somewhere at a minimum as a team's backup scoring guard off the bench.
I also think that, and maybe this will mean more activity around the trade deadline, but I think that when we look at the summer and what's gone on with the new CBA, and I know this is a bigger conversation probably for another show, but I look at the change that I actually really like with the mid-level exception, with being able to use that as a trade exception, be able to absorb a player. So we've seen a few teams, and I can't recall off the top of my head all the teams that did it, but that held on to their mid-level exception rather than use it so that they could use it at the trade deadline as a way to absorb a salary. So that's something where maybe we see some activity there. But in general, my biggest concern with the new CBA was that this would happen. There was that we would see less movement from teams, both in terms of signings, but also on the trade market, that it would be a little bit too restrictive, and that what the NBA enjoys is a 24/7 news cycle, 365 days a year. that dominates the other sports in the, I mean, even if you look at their social standing, even over the NFL, which obviously the NFL dominates, ratings and everything, but the NBA
Sure.
news cycle is incredible. And my concern was that they would dampen that with some of the moves that they've made. And I think it's too early to come to that conclusion. But as someone who had that fear going in with the new CBA, I think we've seen a few signs that maybe that could be happening.
Yeah, I will also say too, I think it's our, like, in you and I are guilty of it as anybody here with our show, is we kind of want constant news, right? Because it's
Sure.
like it's what we thrive on. And then I think we forget, like it was funny how many people were like, it's trade deadline, like a couple days out, they're like, nothing's happened. Like, what is going on? It's like, we already had a massive OG Anunoby trade. We had the Siakam trade. We had the Harden trade happened in season. It just happened in, the end of October, early November period. Like, I think sometimes it's transaction comes in, we do our thing about it for a couple days, and then we're like, what's next? Like, let's get to the next one. And there were some big stuff. Like Paul George moved on a max deal as a free agent. The Mikal Bridges trade. We had the Klay Thompson move. We had the DeJounte Murray trade. The Thunder spent essentially all their money on Isaiah Hartenstein, but like they did that move. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So there were some big moves. There were quite a few trades. It's just, it feels like it's now been a while. And you and I have talked about this off air. We also got very spoiled that we spent an entire offseason last year, all the way up till training camp, talking about what's going to happen with Damian Lillard, what's going to happen with James Harden. And those didn't resolve until right before training camp, and then as the season gets started. So it does feel a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does. And again, we can spend a bunch of time on that when we get into a later show here in August. All right, well, I guess somehow, Keith,
Yeah,
we're
there's
almost
only
here.
2 days left.
There's only 2 days left. Thank you. Go away, August. Go away.
2 days that'll feel like 25, but it's okay.
Yeah. All right, let's jump over to the Suns. Keith, you told me the number. They saved a ton of money. Was it 30 something million?
33 million this year. Yeah.
So much.
Yeah, so the Suns, we have full confirmation they did. We knew they were going to waive and stretch Nasir Little. That had been reported. We now have confirmation that they waived and stretched EJ Liddell too. So EJ Liddell's on the books for about 700, a little over 700,000 for each of the next 3 years. Nasir Little on the books for a little over 3.1 million for each of the next 7 years for him. But those two guys knocking their salaries down from about 9 million to a combined about 3.8 million for this upcoming season saved the Suns $33 million in taxes and penalties with that. That's just how far over the tax line they are. They're getting dinged at the higher rate. And then it's important to note too, the last phased in part of the tax CBA like implications starts next season, 25-26. That's when the tax bans change. So they get far less restrictive if you're just dipping your toe into the tax, you're not going to get hammered like you do today. But if you are Suns, Celtics, Bucks, where the Warriors were, where the Clippers were, you're going to get drilled at levels we've never seen before. So really that's Boston and Phoenix primarily are facing that as soon as next season, 25-26. But for now, it's where it's been. And for the Suns, 33 million in savings by choosing to waive and stretch those two guys. So as much as they were like, well, we wanted the roster flexibility and all that, sure. We also wanted 33 million. And my guess is they're looking at it and saying, hey, 3 million 6 years from now for Nasir Little, if that keeps us from doing some kind of move, then I guess we'll have to figure out how to do that move another way. Like our whole thing started together talking about Luol Deng's dead money on the books when the Lakers were trying to sign
right.
LeBron. And guess what? The Lakers made it work when 5 million was far more restrictive than 3 million would be against the cap. So that's my guess is they're like, for all that we'd rather not have 3 million on the books over the next 7 years. It is what it is. We'll deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. So the Suns saved themselves a boatload of money. And that's sometimes when you look at that, there's times where you see a deal go through and you're like, what the heck are they? Oh, oh, I get $33 million. That's a lot. I
Yep.
know Matt Ishbia is rolling in the dough, but still, that's a lot of money. Do you think Nasser Little or EJ Liddell wind up getting other contracts here?
Boy, I hope so for Little at least. Liddell, I mean, I hope for him too. Obviously, I want everybody to
I was
do
going to say,
well,
what do you have
but
against EJ Liddell, Keith?
he just hasn't proven as much, you know. And
Right.
unfortunately for him, he had that injury at summer league a couple years ago, cost him his rookie year, and then last year, I mean, he could play a little bit, but he's got a longer road. I think Nasir Little can play. My guess is this is probably going to be one though where he's probably throw him in that list of free agents, and they'll hang out on that list with a whole bunch of other dudes for probably several weeks now, leading up to training camp. And then when somebody has some kind of injury on the wing, they'll maybe give him a look. But you might have to go G League now at this point to show like, all right, here's what I can do. And that's maybe not the worst thing in the world. Maybe you can really kind of pick it up and show some new skills or something.
Yeah, and so I do think that that he'll get a look somewhere, but it just may take a little bit, especially again in the new NBA that we were just talking about with the new collective bargaining agreement. It might make spots a little more difficult to come by. All right, let's get into this. So country music star Luke Travers signs a deal, gets a two-way contract with the Cavs. Keith, I need to while you're explaining, I need to pull up a picture for anybody who doesn't know what Luke Travers looks like. What are the Cavs getting here in Luke Travers, Keith? While I pull that up.
Yeah, interesting player. We knew this is where the country music star bit came from. We knew they were going to sign him. Now we have clarity. The Cavs are still sitting on 3 open roster spots, like standard roster spots. But now we have clarity. He did sign a
There he is.
two-way. There's our guy, Luke, country music star Luke Travers.
He's Australian, but still.
He's Australian, yeah. But he's coming in to play for the Cavs on a two-way. Interesting player. He was drafted late in the second round in 2022. He has played his professional career for Perth, then moved to Melbourne last year. Had his best year as a pro for Melbourne a year ago. He's not overly big. He's about 6'7", but he plays more like a traditional 4 than he does anything else. He's fairly rugged. He does most of his work in and around the basket area. Did shoot fairly well 2 seasons ago from 3, hit 37%. So maybe, we'll see. My guess is if he really wants to make an impact in the NBA, he is going to have to shoot a little bit better. But here's what was exciting. So I said 12 points per game last year, 7.5 rebounds, 2 assists. So can move the ball a little bit, but 1.2 steals and 1.3 blocks. And that was across 36 games with Melbourne last year. So pretty good counting stats there. So we'll see what it looks like with him. But somebody the Cavs have liked for a while. If people like, I kind of remember this guy with the kind of long hair, and maybe have seen him play. Why he's even in a Cavs jersey? It's because he has played for the Cavs at Summer League. For the last 3 seasons, actually played for the Cavs, and this year decided, I think it was kind of it's now or never time. I want to make my way over because Luke Travers is, let me double check and make sure on this. Yeah, he will turn 23 in just a few days. So it's kind of, for a prospect, you're getting to the point where you either need to come over or you're probably not gonna. So give it a shot, see what it looks like. If it doesn't work out, my guess is either go back to Australia or land in Europe and play there. But this is an interesting player for Cleveland, at least. And Cleveland doesn't have a ton in the forward line. That's not a overly well-stocked position for them. So maybe he could find his way onto the floor.
All right, let's finish up with this. The Wizards add a trio on camp deals. Now, are these also Exhibit 10s? Because I haven't looked into these.
Yeah, these are all Exhibit 10s. This reporting came out yesterday from Josh Robbins of The Athletic. They are adding, let me make sure I can get all the names. Notable names for a couple of these guys. Jalen Noel, who's played in the NBA last year, was with Memphis and Detroit on some 10-day contracts. Then played most of the year with the Stockton Kings in the G League. Kyra Lewis Jr., who was a former first-round pick, never really quite made it with New Orleans. got traded to Toronto, then ultimately traded to Utah. They're bringing him in. That one's a little more interesting to me than maybe Noel, because the Wizards don't have a ton at the point guard spot right now after losing Tyus Jones in the offseason. They've got Malcolm Brogdon as their primary point guard. And then right now, their backup's probably Jared Butler. I think they're going to do what they can to give a lot of minutes to Bob Carrington at that position. Yes, I'm overlooking Johnny Davis. I'm out. Like, I don't think it's going to happen with him. So maybe Lewis is a guy who could work his way into something with Washington eventually. And then the third guy is Leaky Black, who was on a two-way with the Charlotte Hornets last season. He's about 6'6", 6'7" forward. Played okay in the G League. No, I kind of don't see it with him. I didn't see it in his brief NBA time. I didn't really see it on his G League film either when I watched that, but we'll see. You know, maybe he pops, but that one's probably more designed get him to the very funly named Capital City Go-Go of the G League, the Wizards G League affiliate.
That's a good one.
Yep, I like it. That's that throwback like we were talking about the other day to the fun G League names, like when they had all the crazy names like Mad Ants, which are still hanging around. We're unfortunately we don't have enough of those anymore. We've had too many go by the wayside.
Yeah, exactly. I would. That's the kind of thing where I want to get like a hat or a shirt or something from some of these clubs, just because a lot of people haven't heard of them, but they've got great names. They have some phenomenal names for these ones.
Yeah, my favorite one in the G League is the Birmingham Squadron, the Pelicans G League affiliate that plays in Birmingham. I love that one. I just think that's fun. I think the Rip City remix is a lot of fun. I liked it when they were the main Red Claws. And then they branded themselves as the main Celtics, but you know, what are you going to do? You know, I guess eventually it'll probably all be whatever city version than the NBA team name. But as long as we can keep a few fun ones in there, let's make a push for that.
Exactly. Let's keep some fun in the G League, because why not? It's a G League.
Yeah,
have some fun with the names. It doesn't all have to be the South Bay Lakers, the Maine Celtics, and all that kind of stuff. Let's have some fun.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Well, we have almost made it to the end of August. We will have Front Office Friday tomorrow, and that'll be our last show of August, and then it'll be into September. And before you know it, it'll be training camp. Let's go.
Well, that means August. We're in the month that training camp opens after our next show. Yes. So we'll finish out Front Office Friday, and we'll literally say we're going to see you in the month that the NBA will be back and in business. So yeah, we're almost there.
Let's get there. I'm ready for it. All right, everybody. Thank you guys for joining the show. Make sure you do subscribe, turn on those notifications, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, or if you're over on the YouTube channel. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.